The air in the boardroom had grown thick, not with tension, but with a kind of patronizing certainty. "Honestly, Sarah," Mark had said, leaning back as if admiring his own pronouncement, "your initiatives, while well-intentioned, just don't align with our time's vision moving forward." The words were a soft dismissal, yet they struck with the weight of an anvil, aiming to flatten my contributions, my very worth, into irrelevance. His casual, confident tone was echoed by the murmurs of agreement around the table, a low hum of collective disregard. But instead of the expected sting of humiliation, or the familiar pull of self-doubt, something far more profound occurred. A strange, almost physical silence enveloped me, pushing against the noise of their denigration. It was a silence born not of shock, but of an inward implosion, a sudden and radical recentering. In that instant, the external chaos collapsed inward, hardening into a singularity of purpose. Victimhood vaporized, replaced by an unwavering resolve, a dense, unshakable core. The world outside the glass walls still spun loudly, but within me, a new, formidable gravity had taken hold. It wasn't just the final indignity that clarified things. The pattern of being overlooked, of having my contributions quietly absorbed or dismissed outright, stretched back decades. I saw it clearly now. The subtle sidelining during project brainstorms, my detailed reports praised but never truly acted upon, until a male colleague rephrased my exact points a week later and garnered the accolades. I'd always viewed these instances as mere corporate politics, minor frictions in a competitive environment, but looking back, it was a deliberate, consistent erosion of my professional footprint. My potential, a quiet but potent current beneath their surface-level noise, wasn't merely ignored. It was often actively sabotaged by those who feared its rise, cloaking actions in team strategy or budgetary constraints. I remembered the Convergence Initiative most vividly. It was a comprehensive strategic pivot I drafted over a year, complete with market analysis, financial projections, and a phased implementation plan. I presented it with conviction, only to have it casually dismissed by David and Eleanor as too outside the box for our conservative stakeholders. A phrase delivered with dismissive smiles that implied I was naive, maybe even a little foolish. I accepted their judgment then, retreating into the quiet compliance they had come to expect, my assumed invisibility serving as a convenient cloak for their own machinations. Yet, a year later, a strikingly similar, almost identical framework, rebranded as the Horizon Strategy, became their flagship project, credited solely to their innovative leadership. Their motive wasn't pure malice. It was a potent cocktail of ambition and an entrenched, almost subconscious underestimation of anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of power. They saw me as a pliable, predictable fixture, an unseen mass of labor that would contribute but never truly rise to challenge their narrative. What they didn't realize was that unseen mass holds gravitational force, silently bending light and time, ready to manifest with undeniable impact. The Horizon Strategy was theirs on paper, neatly packaged for presentation, but its true roots and its ultimate future were still unequivocally mine to reclaim. The moment of decision didn't arrive with a bang, but with a quiet, undeniable shift, like the earth settling after a distant tremor. They expected fury, perhaps a public display of wounded pride, and certainly chaos. Instead, I felt a stillness descend, a profound calm that clarified everything. My response wouldn't be an emotional outburst. It would be a meticulous, strategic comeback, a re-architecting of the very gravity of our shared world. My first step was a confidential consultation with Eleanor Vance, a corporate attorney known for her precise, dispassionate approach to complex partnership dissolutions. I began systematically organizing every email, text, financial record, and signed document related to our agreements, building a digital fortress of facts. Eleanor estimated 2 weeks just to dissect the labyrinthine contracts and side letters, a timeline I respected. This wasn't about speed, it was about flawless execution. Each piece of evidence, each clause understood, felt like a subtle gathering of gravitational pull. I wasn't just pulling away, I was calculating new orbits and trajectories that would inevitably intersect with theirs, but on my terms, with all the necessary legal leverage. Have you ever felt that quiet, seismic shift when you decide enough is enough? Not with anger, but with an unwavering, almost scientific resolve. The true work began in that silence, long before any official notice would be served. The quiet that settled after the initial shock wasn't silence born of defeat, but the deliberate hush of preparation. While they reveled in their perceived triumph, I began the meticulous work of constructing my case, one invisible brick at a time. Each evening, after another day of their dismissive emails and veiled threats, I sat with my laptop, methodically cataloging. Email timestamps, specifically those altered after our initial agreements, became irrefutable proof. Screenshots of their increasingly misleading communications, stored with precise metadata, built a narrative of deception that no verbal spin could undo. The corporate filings, initially revised to exclude my contributions, were replaced in the public record with my own correct versions, quietly executed through a series of precise legal maneuvers. Notarized copies of the property deeds, once withheld, were now safely in my digital and physical possession, secured through a patient process of lien resolution and quiet negotiation. This silent accumulation made me feel denser, as if my quiet, unwavering focus was generating a unique gravitational pull, drawing critical information and overlooked details directly to me with an almost magnetic inevitability. Then came the unexpected ripple. A discreet third-party investigator, perhaps hired out of simple curiosity or lingering suspicion about my unshakable calm, delivered a detailed report to them. A single line in that confidential document, a casual reference to Times My Times revised corporate filings and Times My Times secured property assets, abruptly shattered their illusion of my dormancy. Their careless confidence began to curdle into something sharper, a growing unease that rapidly replaced their bluster. They thought I was gone, but I had merely gone quiet, becoming a force that accumulated. The quiet I'd so carefully constructed shattered not with a bang, but with the frantic rustle of legal papers arriving by courier. It was the first undeniable proof that they finally understood. My strategic retreat wasn't surrender, but a repositioning. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my absence for defeat, and now the realization hit them like a sudden, cold wave. Within days, the cease and desist letter landed, a poorly veiled attempt to intimidate, alleging everything from defamation to business interference accusations completely unfounded, yet costly to address. Their lawyer, a familiar face from old firm parties, knew the game. This was pure distraction, designed to drain my resources and attention. Email threats to former colleagues soon followed, carefully worded attempts to discredit my professional reputation, hinting at unethical practices without providing a single shred of evidence. Each response required a consultation, a counterfiling, an attorney's hourly rate ticking away. It wasn't just the monetary cost, it was the psychological tax, the subtle friction of defending against a barrage of baseless claims. Yet, these frantic gestures only confirmed my calculations. Their chaos was a direct measure of my control, a desperate lashing out from a position of dwindling power. My influence, like a silent, expanding event horizon, was now visibly pulling them closer, their every reactive move merely accelerating their own trajectory into its inescapable gravitational field. While they expended energy fighting ghosts, I quietly focused on the tangible next steps. The meeting room, usually a theater for their casual dismissals, felt heavy with a different kind of tension that morning. I started calmly, placing the binder on the polished table. Inside were the irrefutable facts, the archived emails detailing my original concept proposal, the meticulously dated development logs, and crucially, the official intellectual property filing, timestamped 2 months prior to their internal announcement. Their initial bluster, the familiar attempts at gaslighting, "We were just building on your early ideas," faltered. The evidence was a solid, undeniable mass. The impact was profound. A silent collision of truth against their carefully constructed narrative. It was the moment my accumulated density, my years of undervalued work, asserted its gravitational pull. The project, my intellectual property, was definitively mine. There was no room for debate, only acceptance. When faced with a pivotal choice, what boundaries have you had to draw for yourself? What quiet strength did you discover? The papers were already drafted, the next steps were clear. The final papers were signed, the last details settled, leaving behind a silence that was less an emptiness and more a profound, deliberate space. The office they once commanded, now stripped bare of their loud presence, felt lighter, filled with potential instead of the stifling pressure I'd endured. Their forced retreat carved out a void, certainly, but this wasn't a vacuum. It was acreage, fertile ground. I watched their departure, not with glee, but with calm acknowledgement. The flurry of panicked calls and frantic emails tapered into nothing, leaving only official records of their divestment and the quiet hum of my new operating systems. What they perceived as a dramatic collapse, a fiery supernova, was simply the clearing of debris. My own space, professional and personal, stretched out before me, redefined and expansive. I found clarity in the quiet. No longer would I contort myself to fit their narrow narratives or be overshadowed by their constant noise. This was my firm, my vision, built on the stable, immense power I had always possessed. Yet they had stubbornly refused to see. I was not a fleeting spectacle. I was a neutron star, radiating quiet strength, an unyielding core of competence and strategic calm. My plans for new ventures, for an advisory board focused on ethical growth and sustainable impact, were already taking shape, carefully, deliberately.